Hello, BookTube. Well, we've come to the end of March Mystery Madness. This is a BookTube event. It's been going on for almost a decade, uh, where we celebrate murder mysteries. Now, I read murder mysteries year-round. I am still going to continue to read murder mysteries, not only uh, random finds that I find at the Brattle Bookshop, but also uh, the new releases from the major American publishers. That mystery is one of the genres that I read, and my attempt will be in 2023, the same attempt it is in every year, which is to read every mainstream new release murder mystery, plus plenty of them that aren't mainstream that are suggested to me indie published from Amazon. Amazon makes liberal recommendations. The algorithm serves up tons of things that I would never know about otherwise. So we are coming to the end of March Mystery Madness for April, or for March, but in April I will still read a large number of murder mysteries, but nevertheless, there's a particular wonder to a BookTube event, and that's ending today. This is the last day of March. I've had a great deal of fun, as always. I'm hoping that a lot of you have added extra murder mysteries to your reading diet for the month of March. And I'm finishing with a reread, and it's a book that I enjoyed it the first time. I'd forgotten that I read it the first time, then I started reading it and realized this is a reread. It's Death of an Ardent Bibliophile by Bartholomew Gill. And this is an adventure of Superintendent Peter McGarr from Dublin. So this book definitely touches on what turned out to be the major concentration of March Mystery Madness for me in 2023, which was the intersection of detection and authority, the role of the police, basically, in the book. Now, I originally thought that I didn't want to end March Mystery Madness by wrestling with that I didn't want to end on a contentious note, believe it or not. So I thought that I would go to a kind of murder mystery where that is not an issue. And that I immediately thought about the amateur sleuths of the Golden Age. But then I thought, well, what about a Marcus Corvinus mystery by David Wishart? Those are set in ancient Rome. They're great, and they are very much along the lines of the whole point of the thing being figuring out who did it, and justice will move from there. But rather than, I can make you confess, much rather than that. I thought about that, but I'm really kind of familiar with those, and so that was one reason why I didn't want to do it. And the other reason why I didn't want to do it is that I don't know that I want to leave without wrestling all the way to the end with this one thing, this one issue that's been my bugaboo for the whole of the month. So I started reading this, and I can't say that it resolved anything. It's more genial for most of its length. It's more genial than a lot of straight-up police procedurals, even though the main character is a superintendent. This doesn't feel like a police procedural at all. It feels more like neighbors solving a crime. It very much is a location mystery. It doesn't bill itself that way, but it is very much a Dublin novel, and a Dublin of a certain time. I don't know anything about Bartholomew Gill. I have no idea if he had people who were there or if he lived in the city himself. But there are quite a few little things here and there, very little details in the way, the colloquial idioms that people use to describe things, like a rainy day, or a surprise in conversation, or the little whirlwinds of fallen leaves when a gust of wind will blow them, but it will blow them in a little tornado around like that. Little words like that were part of Dublin slang and that ring true. I don't think I read one in this whole book that didn't feel right. Dublin really comes across in this book. But this is, as you can tell from the title, this is a story of a book collector, an antiquarian book collector, who is found dead. His name is Brian Herrick, but he is known as the Dean. Not because he's a dean of anything, but because he was, even though he was getting on in years, he wore his hair in elaborate ringlets that were very much designed by him to make him resemble Jonathan Swift. And his old Edwardian home in Dublin has tons of portraits of Jonathan Swift. You're definitely supposed to make that connection. But the title has a bit of a Gaelic pun to it, a little bit of ambiguity, because it's not just that he was a dedicated bibliophile; it's also that he was an ardent bibliophile. He left behind him a long string of illicit romantic encounters, scorned exes, perhaps angry husbands, and McGarr has to deal with all of that. The more he learns about the identity of this murder victim, the more he has to wade into the world of not only antique books, but also art, procurers and purveyors of any kind of rarefied artwork or artistic productions. He doesn't know anything about that himself. His wife Noreen does. She actually has an art gallery in London. So he has to go to her for a lot of expert advice on a whole bunch of things. They actually have a pretty good relationship in this book. It's really was sort of the highlight for me. Certainly the antiquarian book fair stuff, the antiquarian book lore in the book, oddly enough, it didn't really intrigue me. And that was the only element of this that I really remembered from the last time I read it, which was when it first came out. I think this came out in the early 90s. Yeah, 1995. The only element that I remembered from that first reading is that the bibliophile stuff really didn't do much for me in this book, which is kind of weird. Ordinarily, it's guaranteed to. Instead, it was their relationship. And also Bartholomew Gill's commentary on Irish people, which crops up often, Dublin people. I want to read you just a bit of his exchange with his wife, of McGar's exchange with his wife, and also his thinking about what she thinks. Let's see here. This is Noreen talking. Openings, museum shows, that class of thing. I run into her every few months. This is a woman who was intimately involved with the dean. That's who she's talking about. Noreen had fitted on her glasses and now glanced down at the papers that her husband has brought in after being out all night. Oh my God. Do they mean the Brian Herrick, the dean? Is that where you were last night? She looked up at McGar, who was standing in the door of the bathroom. Murdered? I hope not. This is Herrick, McGar telling her. I hope not. But it seems Herrick was even more than what met the eye, which with the long ringlets of Swiftian hair had been enough. Charlotte Bing seems to think he might have been a thief, a forger, and McGar's his tired mind searched for an adequate descriptive phrase to explain what else he had in view of the long night. An ardent bibliophile, to say the least. And you need help with the period forgeries. That's Noreen trying to figure out why he's involving her, because he said he'd like to talk with her about the case. McGar could see from the color that had risen to his wife's fair cheeks that she was game. While in no way a malicious person, Noreen was nonetheless a Dubliner born and bred, and she could not resist the least bit of insider information about one of McGar's cases, especially if it involved anybody as notable as Herrick had been. Not infrequently, McGar wondered how much she had married him, the real McGar, the one apart from his occupation, as she had married the McGar of the murder squad, the one who was written about in the pages of the press. In such a way, McGar's professional involvement had become a kind of leitmotif for their marriage. He imagined that Noreen would get great mileage out of whatever she discovered this morning, when importuned as she would be by the other shopkeepers and business owners in the environs of Dawson Street. Even in the best Dublin circles, that fiercest of cultural strains of the city, the yen for repeatable dirt, remained intact, especially when it came from the horse's mouth, which is what McGar himself was. Twisting on the hot water, he whinnied and yet again thought about Swift. Jonathan Swift is a major character in this book. His collectability, the obsession that the dean had with him, his book, Gulliver's Travels. What had Swift called his race of superior horses in Gulliver? He could not recall that either, and would have to look it up too, or ask Noreen. Or he could ask me. They were called the Winhams. It also now occurred to McGar that Herrick had traveled with the crowd who patronized Noreen's picture gallery and were involved in the arts. Had he not seen Herrick there himself? Noreen might be able to trade information, quid pro quo. By the time McGar was out of the shower and dressed, Noreen was up and had Maddie, that's their little daughter, ready for school. A full Irish breakfast. Rashers, eggs, sausage, black pudding, grilled tomatoes, and toast was on the table. "Daddy, where were you last night?" his daughter scolded as he kissed her good morning and took a seat at the table. "Mammy said it was something important that kept you away, but I don't believe her." Yet another redhead. How could she help but be? She fixed her star-blue eyes on him, as though he would fill her in. "You should always believe your mammy," he said, wondering if the need for stories, good, bad, or even apocryphal, was something inhaled in the air or imbibed in the water, or could it be racial or genetic? And there you get a sense for what's going on here. That's a touch overwritten, but it swoops between characters talking to each other and the narrator of the story telling us about the characters and telling us about some elements of their conversation that they might not be aware of. And that works just fine. That keeps a congenial mystery bubbling along until the 2/3 mark, thereabouts, the 2/3 mark. And at the 2/3 mark, Bartholomew Gill can no longer avoid the fact that McGarr is a cop. And maybe I would ignore it. Maybe I would have ignored it if my sensitivity weren't so increased because of this March Mystery Madness. But I was kind of waiting for the point in the novel in which Gill would impose himself on the natural order of events. In other words, stop detecting and start coercing. Are you sure you don't want to tell me about this? Are you sure you don't want to open up to me? Are you sure you wouldn't rather open up to me now in your living room, or maybe you'd be more comfortable at the station house? That sort of thing. And that happens, unavoidably. It would be unrealistic for me to think that it wouldn't happen, but it does, and I noticed it, and it's on my mind. It's on my mind. As we close up March Mystery Madness for 2023, I'm wondering, the broader sense, the bigger question that I'm wondering is, has the 21st century, has George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, ruined a large swath of murder mysteries for me? Is it, or maybe not ruined, but made them less than innocent pleasures? One of the way that I always think about murder mysteries is that you can pop one open, you can pop it down, you're done with it in no time at all, and it's a wonderful palate cleanser, a wonderful, fun excursion into some twisty whodunit, and will you figure it out, and will you guess correctly, and all that sort of thing. That is how I have viewed murder mysteries, and that's how I love them. But I'm wondering now, I'm thinking now about all the murder mysteries I have loved that way, when they absolutely hinge on the coercive ability of the detective, who is a cop, who is a police person. I'm wondering about that. Like I said, I'm not going to stop reading murder mysteries until next March. So instead, I guess I will find out in the carryover into April. I will find out how much of an effect it has on me when I'm reading just ordinary mysteries in the course of events. I'll probably, in the month of April, read 30 mysteries, thereabouts, something like that. Somewhere between 20 and 30 mysteries, depending on the month. I haven't actually looked to see what shape it is. I have quite a few of them, but I'm sure there are quite a few more. I'll stick to mainstream. If I exhaust mainstream, I will move to, the B list of mainstream. And all along the way, Amazon will be recommending indie stuff. Will I be thinking about that? Or will I maybe make a conscious effort to avoid murder mystery? There are plenty of them, even now, that are written today that don't involve police at all. I don't know. I don't know. I did not see this coming. So that is my final book for March Mystery Madness for 2023. Hoping that you all had a lot of fun. We'll continue to talk about mysteries on this channel, no doubt about it. They are an active part. They are one of the 15 or 16 genres that I read enthusiastically. So I'll wrap this up for now, and feel free in the comments to let me know how you did for March Mystery Madness. If you actually participated, how did you read any mysteries that you liked? Maybe any that skirt the problem that I'm talking about. I'll definitely take those recommendations. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.